setting new standards in podcast excellence. You have joined the WBT, fully focused on business and taxes. Here is your host, Michael Lodge.
And welcome back to the WBT. I'm back after being shut down for about 3 days. I got hit by the tail end. I'm recording this, by the way, in Greenville, South Carolina. And we got hit on Monday with the tail end of Irma as it came up through Florida and then finally hit the Carolinas and into Georgia. Now, I know the feel of a typhoon. Typhoons are damaging. I mean, they do a lot of damage. And I've been through many of them. I've been through them in Japan. I've been through them in Taiwan. I've been through them in the Philippines. So I know exactly what it feels like to have that much wind coming at you, and wind and rain. And that's what happened to us on Monday. Our power went off probably about 7 p.m. and did not come on until about 6 a.m. yesterday morning. And we had no cell phone service. So it was very difficult to even communicate or to get out. One thing that I did notice is that in South Carolina, there are no news stations that keep you informed of what's happening on the hour, by the hour, and I did not see that or could not hear it. In Los Angeles, we always had news stations, talk radio going on 24 hours a day. So you got very used to that type of environment. But here in South Carolina, basically what you have is you've got gospel stations, you've got sports stations pretty much all over the place, and you've got country western. But there are no real news stations or talk radio stations here in the United States. So it's something that you have to get used to, of pretty much relying upon yourself. And that is one of the things that I have had to deal with. I mean, it's a new experience for me, for one thing. And those high winds did do a lot of damage. A lot of trees were pulled up pretty much by the root and toppled over. My next door neighbor trees were literally split in half. One went one way and the other one went the other way. So it's a new experience. So I want you to continue praying for all those people who were damaged in Florida and especially in Texas. You know, hurricanes are a tough issue to deal with. It really is. So today we're talking about tax issues, which is almost the same thing as hurricane issues. It pretty much comes in and wipes you out if you're not careful enough. But I want you to know that you do have a Bill of Rights. Every year I publish in my blogs and I broadcast on my podcast what your Bill of Rights are all about. In fact, there is current legislation that has been passed in Congress and on its way to the Senate that will even make it harder for the IRS to be abusive in going after taxpayers. But you have rights when dealing with the IRS, and you need to know them. At some point in your life, it's going to happen, you will have to deal with the Internal Revenue Service in some issue. So get to know your rights. Every taxpayer has a set of fundamental rights, and the IRS has the obligation to protect them. The Taxpayer Bill of Rights groups the taxpayers' rights, and they're found in the tax code, and they put them into like 10 categories. Know these rights when interacting with the IRS, and we're going to go over what your rights are. So let's begin with number 1. The right to be informed. Taxpayers have the right to know what to do in order to comply with tax laws. And they're complex, right? These tax codes are volumes of books, and there's no way that taxpayers are going to know those volumes of books. You are entitled to clear explanations of the laws and IRS procedures on all tax forms, instructions, publications, notices, and the correspondence that they send you. You have the right to know about IRS decisions affecting your accounts, and you should receive very clear explanations of the outcomes. you have the ability to question those outcomes. Never think that just because you get a letter from the IRS that it ends right there. No, you have the ability to question and to appeal. Number 2, the right to quality service. Taxpayers have the right to receive prompt, courteous, and professional assistance in their interactions with the IRS. They also have the right to be spoken to in a way they can easily understand, to receive clear and easily understandable communications from the IRS, and to speak to a supervisor about inadequate service. Always remember that, number 2, okay? You have the right to quality service. Number 3, the right to pay no more than the correct amount of tax. Taxpayers have the right to pay only the amount of tax legally due, including interest and penalties, and to have the IRS apply all tax payments properly. Now, again, you have the right to appeal that. If you do not agree with what the IRS is telling you, you have the right to fight back. Remember that. Number 4, the right to challenge the IRS position and be heard. Taxpayers have the right to raise objections and provide additional documentation in response to formal IRS actions or proposed actions. They also have the right to expect the IRS to consider their timely objections promptly and fairly, and to receive a response if the IRS does not agree with their position. Remember what I've been telling you is that you have the right to be heard. You have the right to petition. You have the right to appeal. You have the right to challenge. Challenge is the key word. Number 5, the right to appeal an IRS decision in an independent forum. Taxpayers are entitled to a fair and impartial administrative appeal of most IRS decisions, including many penalties, and have the right to receive a written response regarding the Office of Appeals when they appeal a decision, when you want to appeal a decision. Taxpayers generally have the right to take their cases to tax court. So just remember that you have the right to appeal any decision. But I'm going to caution you on this. Hire a professional that knows how to appeal your case, because they can do it faster and quickly, because they know the jargon that the IRS uses and they know how to argue the tax code better than you do. But remember, you have the right to appeal, and you can do it either by yourself or through a professional. Number 6 is the right to finality. Taxpayers have the right to know the maximum amount of time they have to challenge the IRS position, as well as the amount of time the IRS has to audit a particular tax year or collect a tax debt. Taxpayers have the right to know when the IRS has finished an audit. Number 7, the right to privacy. Taxpayers have the right to expect that an IRS inquiry, audit, or enforcement action will comply with the law and be no more intrusive than necessary, and will respect all due process rights, including search and seizure protections, and will provide, where applicable, a collection due process hearing. Now remember, there is tax legislation that has been passed by the House of Representatives and has gone over to the Senate side that protects your rights even more on search and seizure, and also on the seizure of property. So we need to support the Senate and tell them, hey, support this law, because you need to sign off on it very quickly so that you protect taxpayers' rights. Number 8 is the right to confidentiality. Taxpayers have the right to expect that any information they provide to the IRS will not be disclosed unless authorized by the taxpayer or by law. Taxpayers have the right to expect appropriate action will be taken against employees, return preparers, tax return preparers, and others who wrongfully use or disclose taxpayer return information. So remember, your tax information is confidential. and you must be protected on that confidentiality. Not only do tax preparers are required by law to protect your confidentiality, but your tax data is also protected by the Federal Trade Commission, because the act of being a tax preparer and the data that they store in each taxpayer is supposed to be stored properly and securely. If your tax preparer is not storing your documentation securely, you have the right to talk about that with the Internal Revenue Service and also with the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC. So remember that every taxpayer, not every taxpayer, but every tax preparer is under the laws of banks because of the data protection of each and every single one of you and in your tax return. Remember, your tax return has a lot of information there that thieves would love to get their hands on. With that information, they can open bank accounts, they can go buy stuff, they can get credit, they can do whatever. They can even get your tax refund. So remember, you are protected by the Internal Revenue Service on confidentiality and data confidentiality through the Federal Trade Commission. Remember that. Number 9, the right to retain representation. Taxpayers have the right to retain an authorized representative of their choice to represent them in their dealings with the Internal Revenue Service. Taxpayers have the right to seek assistance from a low-income taxpayer clinic if they cannot afford representation. Representation means that you are being represented by a certified public accountant, by a licensed tax practitioner known as an enrolled agent, and by your tax preparer if he or she has prepared your tax return. There's some limitations on that one. But make sure that you know that you have the right to representation. And I'm telling you, it's better that you have professional representation to go before and represent you before the Internal Revenue Service. Just remember that you have the right to representation. Number 10, the right to a fair and just tax system. Taxpayers have the right to expect the tax system to consider facts and circumstances that might affect their underlying liabilities, ability to pay, or ability to provide information timely. Taxpayers, which is you, have the right to receive assistance from the Taxpayer Advocate Service if they are experiencing financial difficulty or the IRS has not resolved their tax issues properly and timely through its normal channels. So those are the 10 items that you need to know as your Taxpayer Bill of Rights. If you are getting a letter from the Internal Revenue Service and they've contacted you to say, hey, you are being audited, or we have questions regarding your tax return, remember, you have a Taxpayer Bill of Rights that will back you up. Remember, you are protected. And if you feel that at any point in time that your rights are being gone against by the Internal Revenue Service, speak up, because you have those rights. You have the right to speak up. You have the right to appeal. You have the right to confront. You have the right to ask for more information. You have so many rights to protect you at any time when you are before the Internal Revenue Service. If you have any questions, just send me an email at mlodge, M-L-O-D-G-E, at lodge, lodge-co.com, and I will try and answer them for you. I hope that you have all survived on the East Coast. I hope you've all survived the hurricanes, and perhaps there's another one coming that I'm hearing about. But let's all be prepared, okay? And let's all know our Taxpayer Bill of Rights every single day that we have to deal with the Internal Revenue System. So this is Mike Lodge, and with the WBT, I will speak to you soon.
This is brought to you by Lodge & Co., a business and tax advisory firm where your success is our goal. Call us today toll-free at 888-681-1518 or visit us at www.lodge-co.com